Welcome to Regeneration, a podcast about reimagining Jewish customs in a modern world. I'm Debs Weinberg.
And I'm Eileen Levinson. And we're here to help families, friends, and chosen families revive customs with authenticity, creativity, and joy.
From Shabbat candles to everyday blessings, discover how you can weave new and old practices together across the generations to bring the people you love closer.
I have a question for you, Debs. Was there a time when you remember the thing that happens to every parent that I dread already with having a toddler, when one of your kids decided they were just too old for snuggles?
The amazing thing, in my family, we still love to snuggle. I have pictures of my adult children still snuggling together. You know, we are a very touchy family, and so Ben still gives me a hug the first, and he'll hold me. So I've never had that moment. And I hear it from other friends when their kids stop wanting to be hugged. But that has not happened in our family.
Your kids are well into their 30s or I don't know, maybe older.
Yes. And yes, saying I love you. It's still very important in our family.
Well, That seems to track with what I know about you. And I have to say that I come from a very huggy family as well. And I think in some ways my family probably, I don't know, my parents maybe weren't great about talking about their emotions and we didn't develop, I think when I was younger, a huge language for talking about our emotions. But there was a lot of touch and hugs and a lot of I love yous. And with my mom especially, I would joke when my friends were meeting her now as adults, that if you ever wanted somebody to give you a hug and tell you she loved you and you're wonderful, go see Barbara Levinson. But, my mom also was a first grade teacher, so she brings that energy. So I think now, because obviously I have a baby, and with toddlers, there's lots of hugs and snuggles, and it's so wonderful. And then I kind of dread the point where he says, "Mom, don't give me a hug, don't give me a smooch." And so I'm just thinking about the ways that we can still stay connected. But, we think about bringing in the senses to ritual. And I think we've gone through all of the things in our ritual toolkit. And touch is so basic, and not just the way that our objects feel, but the way that we feel. All the ways that a human embrace is so essential to feeling connected.
I remember a time in my own family where during Shabbat, we would hold hands and kind of join together in a circle. We don't do that now, with our grandkids. But one thing we do is when we bless the children, we do it in a huddle so that everybody is connected. And there is something very special about that time.
Mm-hmm. Debs, I'm excited about our guest today because I know that things change so quickly with kids. And our guest today has an approach to ritual that is flexible enough to change as her kids get older and life changes, and whatever surprises they bring, she seems to be able to adapt in some way while also being really consistent. And she seems unshakable in her commitment to doing the ritual over and over and over again. And it's not always perfect, but she won't miss the opportunity. I really respect that, and it makes me want to really double down on the commitment to ritual and just being more consistent. She's also now host of the popular podcast Chutzpod, which I love, and is well known for her ability to gather people and build community, which she's now doing in Aspen. Rabbi Shira Stutman, we're so excited to have you here on Regeneration.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to have this conversation today. I have been a rabbi for, it's so crazy to say, about 25 years now. My career has been in the arena of the startup rabbinate. I have worked in a number of different places, helping to build Jewish community and make change in the Jewish community. I spent a lot of years at a place in Washington, D.C. called 6th and I Historic Synagogue, working primarily with young Jews and Jewish adjacent people in their 20s and 30s, helping them figure out what Judaism would mean for them in their lives. But I also helped start Jewish communities in Philadelphia. And now I'm here in Aspen, Colorado, working at a synagogue called the Aspen Jewish Congregation, serving as the senior rabbi of this extraordinary congregation in the mountains.
Why has welcoming Jews and non-Jews, or as you speak about in your consultancy, mixed multitudes, become so important to you?
Look, here's my basic premise. I believe in the power of religion to help people build meaningful lives. And Judaism happens to be mine, my religion, my civilization. And so I think religion can be the technology that allows us to grow into the people that we want to be in the world. Human beings are meaning-seeking creatures. Research bears that out over and over again, that 50% of human beings once a day think to ourselves, what can I do to build a life of meaning? And actually, religion has answers to that. And so whether you actually are Jewish or aren't Jewish, Judaism actually has answers to how you can build a meaningful life. Do acts of chesed, loving kindness, give tzedakah, help give money away to build a better world, rest on Shabbat, have a meaningful eating-based practice. We actually have the answers. And so whether you're Jewish or not, my goal in my life is help to provide a buffet of answers to people that they can choose from based on what is actually meaningful to them to help them grow into the life that they want to grow into. It's all there for us. We just have to know that it's there.
I'd love to hear more about the rituals that you practice, and if there are any particular ones that stand out that, again, help you make meaning in life. Do you have a daily practice?
The daily practice that's most meaningful to me is my morning gratitude practice. I wake up in the morning, and I'd say 5 or 6 mornings out of 7, I wake up and I'm already feeling behind. I'm already feeling like I don't have enough time in my day for whatever it is that I want to do. I don't have enough time to get my work done. I don't have enough time to see the people that I want to see. I don't have enough time to work out. Whatever it is, I don't have enough time. And so every single morning, I wake up, I take 2 minutes. And between me and you and whoever listens to this podcast, I take a few minutes just to say the Modeh Ani prayer, just to say thank you. Whatever else it is that I don't have enough time for, I am grateful that I am alive. And the between you and me part is I often just say it in the shower while I'm lathering up my hair. So it's kind of ironic. I'm already multitasking while I'm doing my gratitude practice. I am not one of those people who does my gratitude prayer while I'm sitting in lotus pose and breathing. I don't even take the time to do that, but yet I still take the time to say the prayer, to remember that even as I'm already behind, I'm still grateful that I'm alive. And it actually helps center me and helps me recognize that however busy the rest of the day gets, I'm alive, I'm grateful, that whatever else I do or don't get done, it's enough and it's okay. And I'm still here and I'm grateful for it. One of the things that's on my mind right now is, so I have 3 kids who are on their way to being grown, 2 in college and 1 who's beyond college. And one of the practices that was most important for me and my husband is that every single Friday night, we bless them. In the Jewish tradition, on Friday nights, there are blessings you say over their kids. In our family, we did the gendered blessings, one for our boy and then the other one for our girls. And then there's one that you say for the kids together. But if you're in a sort of post-gender family, there are other blessings that you can say for your kids, no matter what their gender is. And every Friday night, our kids were required to be home for Shabbat. And now that they're grown, every single Friday, we say the blessings over our kids, no matter where they are. And that is a grounding blessing also that sort of every single Friday I have to get up. Right now I have one kid who's in South Africa, one kid who's living in Boston, one kid who's living in Providence, and I live in Colorado. And I have to think to myself, okay, what time zone is every child in so that I can get to them before Shabbat? I don't do it perfectly anymore. I don't get to all of them before Shabbat every Friday again, but I get to them sometime during Shabbat. And again, it's like a way of being grounded in who I am, what the primary values are of our family every single week. And that's what Judaism does for me. It helps bring me back to center what my primary values are and who I want to be in the world.
I love the blessing of your children. And I was wondering, for our listeners who may not have this in their practice, if you could describe it a little more. Do you know of other practices that people have around the blessing of children, which to me is just one of those special moments?
Yeah. I mean, what you're describing, Debs, is so beautiful because it's about touch. Especially once your kids hit their teenage years, you don't get to touch them that much anymore. They're so elusive. It's like when your kids are 3, all they want to do is touch you. And you're like, stop touching me. I want to be like my own individual person. It's like, but once they hit like bar bat mitzvah age, every time you touch, they're like, stop touching me. But if you've established the practice where they know every Friday afternoon that you get to touch them, it's so lovely. And so as I described, in our family, our kids were not allowed to go out on Fridays at all, ever, which is a very big ask. And I know a lot of families, that's just not their practice. And so what we did on Friday nights was we had takeout Shabbat every Friday night. And we really literally invested in takeout Shabbat. Our kids were allowed to choose where takeout came from, which meant that on Friday nights, especially once our kids became teenagers, all their friends came to our house. We could have 12 teenagers at our house on a Friday night. And our friends, their friends knew that the friends were allowed to choose where takeout came from. And they were allowed to choose from up to 2 takeout places on Friday night, which means that we had to feed up to 12 teenagers on a Friday night. Imagine having to get sushi for 12 teenagers on a Friday night. When I said it's an investment, it literally was. So we would have 12 teenagers that we had to bless on a Friday night, most of whom were not Jewish. Our kids did not go to Jewish day school. So that was very, very sweet. Not only did we have to bless our own kids, we had to bless all these other kids. So so I just want you to have the image of having to bless all of these kids. So again, and different families do it differently. We did it gendered. So we had the boys on one side and we had the girls over here. And all these girls would come and they would bow their heads Christian style, because a lot of them came from Christian backgrounds. And I kept saying, you don't have to bow your heads. So they would all bow their heads. And I would touch all their heads, and I would do the blessings, and I would go around. And then the question is, do I treat them exactly like I would treat my kids? So I decided to treat them like my kids. So after everyone, I would say, I love you. And then I'd kiss the top of their heads, just like I would say, I love you to my kids and kiss the top of their heads. And it was like, I'm almost crying just telling you this story. It's like the sweetest thing. It's a very nice extension of what can happen of this one very intimate parent-child experience when you really insist on doing it week after week. It is an example of what can happen when you insist on the discipline of ritual. This is what makes Judaism different from other faith traditions. We chose to insist on discipline. It's not something you do whenever you feel like it.
I mean, the important message that I hope listeners are taking away is that Shabbat, you have to make it your own and you have to do what works for you. And we have to give people permission to do what works for them, to be together and to be able to celebrate and to take that pause.
You know what, Debs? I want to say 2 things about that because I think that is so important. Number one, me specifically, and then my husband adjacent, we have a extraordinarily high tolerance for chaos. Very high tolerance for chaos. And not everyone does, on a chaos, from
Scale.
0 to 10 scale, from 0 to 10, I am a 10. I'm okay with people coming in and out of the house and not knowing how many people are coming for dinner and setting up chairs. And and people coming at different times and the teenagers falling asleep by accident on the couch. And that's just me. And not everyone is like that. It's just, people have to have grace with themselves and know who they are. And the second thing I want to say is I'm talking about teenage life. When I had toddlers, we did not do it like this. We did all of this for Havdalah. Everything was about Havdalah. And we had Havdalah dinners. And so we didn't have guests as much on Shabbat. We lived in Philadelphia at that point instead of DC. And so we would have everyone over for Havdalah because my husband and I were still working those crazy jobs. And so we didn't have energy on Friday nights to have people over like this, or with the kids who had to be asleep by 5:30 and da-da-da-da-da-da. But Havdalah is a beautiful ceremony.
I'd love to hear more about the ritual of Havdalah. Can you talk a little bit about that and about the end of Shabbat and how you go from the pause that Shabbat brings and then back into the week and how you make that a ritual?
Look, Havdalah is wonderful, especially, Havdalah is wonderful at any age because it incorporates all of the senses, right? It incorporates your sense of scent because you're dealing with smelling the sweet spices, your sight because you have the candle, taste, obviously, because you have the wine, sound because you're singing together. So Havdalah is wonderful for people of all ages. There are a few complicating parts of Havdalah. One is that technically it's supposed to take place at the end of Shabbat, which can be quite late in the summertime. So if you're not observant, you can do it before the end of Shabbat. Also, technically, you can do Havdalah anytime from the end of Shabbat through halfway to next Shabbat. Okay, so technically you can do it Sunday morning. Some people will do it Sunday morning, like when the kids wake up the next morning. So, do what you will. But in any case, it's just like a very, very lovely ceremony to do, especially with children. It can feel weird for some people to do it if they haven't marked Shabbat at all on a Saturday. I do understand that. For me, especially if you're dealing with children, it's still nice to do it because, first of all, it reminds you that it's still Shabbat on Saturday, and children don't care. Like, you can still say to kids, oh, by the way, it's still Shabbat. Let's do this ritual. It helps to remind us that time is sacred, right? The time is sacred. And so you can talk to children about the fact that in Judaism, sure, of course, places can be sacred. Sometimes people say, in Judaism, we don't think of places as sacred. We think of time as sacred because of that beautiful teaching by Abraham Joshua Heschel, in which he talks about the Sabbath and But the truth is, in Judaism, we actually do believe that place is sacred. It's actually a little bit of a misnomer to say that we don't. But really, in Judaism, we believe that time is sacred. So you can talk with children about that a little bit. And then you can show them all the beautiful markers of sacred time, which are all the candle and the spices and the wine or the grape juice. And so I think it's a beautiful ritual to introduce with children. Also, of course, if you're talking about Havdalah with children, you can make all of the Havdalah ritual items with them. You can make a Havdalah candle. You can make a spice sack with them. So it's a great ritual to do with them. And as I said, Shabbat is too exhausting. You can do Havdalah with them.
So you're talking about the ways that we can bring the tactile nature of Havdalah in. There's definitely a DIY aspect in terms of what we can do to literally craft it. If you can just for a moment think back to when you were with your toddlers and what other special things you would do or adapt to do Havdalah with them to really make that the family moment for weekly marking time weekly.
The most important thing that I would do with my kids is to do it every week. To me, the most important things that I would do as a parent was the same across all the rituals. It wasn't like to make Havdalah different to do. I wasn't a big art project kind of parent. The same part of Shira that wasn't a cook and that didn't make challah was the part of Shira that didn't do art projects around Havdalah. But I was the kind of parent who was really into constancy. And so I would encourage you as a parent to lean into whoever you are and to do that even more so. We had traveling Havdalah sets. We had traveling Chanukiot, and so if we were on vacation for Hanukkah, we would light the candles every single night, no matter where we were. So that's what I mean. We would light the Shabbos candles wherever we were. We would do Passover wherever we were. Well, we were the kind of family that was always with our family for Passover, but you know what I mean. If you're not going to be with family in Passover, it doesn't matter. Have a Seder with wasabi if you're in Japan, or do those sort of things, because that's so much fun. Your kids will never forget the year that you were in Japan for Passover and had to sit in a supermarket and figure out how to make a Seder plate in a Japanese supermarket. They will talk about that for the rest of their lives. I will say this. Yes, if you're in Aspen one year for Passover Seder, you're welcome to come to my synagogue and have Seder with us. We will welcome you with open arms. But what will be more fun is if your family figures out how to have your own Seder in your house with whatever you can find in the local supermarket. A DIY Seder will be more fun. Again, you're welcome to come to us. But doing things as a family, figuring things out as a family will be twice as much fun.
That really seems like the essence of ritual. And it's not about, I know people have so many reasons why ritual is powerful. But what I love about this conversation is we're not talking about being a good Jew or a bad Jew if you do or don't, or what God does or doesn't command us to, although there's plenty of that, or what we even owe to the Jewish people. It's about a dedication to making meaning in our lives. And as you say, honoring that time is sacred. And in order to do that, we have to have consistency.
Eileen, based on what you said, I mean, I absolutely agree. And I do find that ritual, I mean, it can be grounding, the fact that there's constancy. When I have not taken the time to actually celebrate Shabbat and kind of mark it differently, every day just seems like it's every day. You know, it's just, there's something special that happens and you have to experience it by making sure that every Friday night you take that pause and it feels, and that it's different. It does distinguish the days.
You know why? What you're both saying is so important is because if all you have is chaos, you need anchors. You know, here I am just like promoting chaos, but it's not true that all I have is chaos. I have the anchors too of Shabbat, right? Yes. And so you really need the anchors for when the shit hits the fan.
Mm-hmm.
If someone gets sick or someone dies and you don't have the anchors of Shabbat or Havdalah or the holidays, then you won't have anything to hold you. You know, I'm thinking about, I didn't only have Shabbat when I'm going on vacation, you know, to beautiful places. I had Shabbat when my dad was in the hospital and dying of cancer, right? So we had Shabbat, we lit the candles when he was having his bone marrow transplant. And we lit the candles when we were sitting Shiva. And we lit the candles, you know, we light his Yortzeit candle every single year and so those anchors hold you down at the terrible moments, not just when you're like celebrating all the wonderful parts of life. And so that's arguably when you need the anchors more than any other moment of life. But if you don't have the anchors in the good moments of life, you're not going to have them in the terrible moments of life. And so you really need to, in a way, the having Seder in Japan that's just practice, right? That is practice for when you really need them to hold you and in their embrace. And so that's why what you're saying is so important. And it's like shame on me as a rabbi for not realizing that until I'm listening to the two of you talk.
When I think about anchors, I think about how ritual is really a practice. And obviously, we've all had transformative experiences where we might be participating in a ritual that somebody else has helped hold for us. But really, for us, ritual is a muscle that we build so that we can not only use it to celebrate the great moments in life, but also when we need support in the hard moments. We're going to have an episode coming up with Rabbi Josh Fagelson from the Institute of Jewish Spirituality, and he's all about building this practice of mindfulness that can carry us through the difficult moments and the joyous moments and help us all welcome whatever's coming. I think if we're thinking really literally about the analogy of the anchor, you bring it out when you need something to stop the ship or keep you in the same place, but you've got to carry that anchor with you in the boat. You don't just snap your fingers and an anchor shows up and it's there when you need it. So I think that's what ritual is. It's making sure that we have the anchor with us to use at the right moment.
Eileen, I love that metaphor of the anchor, because I think that ritual keeps us like an anchor, grounded and steady when we need it.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think for a lot of us, for so many years, the rituals that our grandparents or ancestors gave us might have been just fine as anchors. Or maybe they weren't, but nobody was saying anything and they just walked away from Judaism. Now we're in this wonderful place where we realize that we all really do have the agency to craft our Jewish lives in ways that work best for us. And it's not just because we live in the world where anything can be personalized. It's because that's actually the Jewish tradition, is to continue to adapt Judaism as our lives change, as long as we are keeping the essence in mind.
I love the work that you're doing, and I especially love the connection to grandparents. And I just want to offer you a dream that I've always had, which is, I was so blessed. One of the lines that we have in our family system is that the words savta and saba are verbs. Savta is the word for grandma, and saba is the word for grandpa in Hebrew. And that they're verbs, not nouns, because my mother and my stepfather were ever present for my kids. And really, we joke that they raised our children. And because my husband and I were always working. And so we were so lucky to have that in our family system. And so many of my congregants just don't have that, especially out here in the Roaring Fork Valley, where so many people live so far away from their parents and love their parents, or so close to them, they just don't have them physically present. And so I've always had the dream of building a Jewish community in which we have these grandparents who don't live near their grandchildren, but have all this energy to give to grandchildren. And I wish we could build communities where, like, grandchildren who aren't their physical grandchildren, and grandchildren could be grandparents. And then, so we could have this exchange of grandparenting energy.
Yes.
Debs is so lucky to most of the year get to live near her grandchildren and get to do that. But, like, what if she didn't? And she could give that, we could, like, exchange the energy, and it could be especially meaningful when you have grandparents and grandchildren where the grandparents and their kids just don't mesh perfectly. But yet they actually could mesh with other grandchildren. And so, I don't know, maybe you guys can work on that and figure it out. I have this dream of an Adopt a Bubby program, or Adopt a Zadie program. And maybe one day we could grow that in the Roaring Fork Valley.
Shira, I love the idea of an Adopt a Bubby program. I know that at the Jewish Grandparents Network that we often think about how to encourage intergenerational programming. And one of the things that we are planning to help grandparents and grandfriends to do is to volunteer together. So stay tuned for more about intergenerational programming.
I just have to say, this has been so fun because as a fan of Chutzpod, I feel like this was an opportunity for Debs and I to come on and be the guests that are posing the questions to you. So this was really like a personal dream come true to have you on this. And it's been so fun and I'm so grateful.
It was our fantasy.
Yeah, this is so much fun.
True.
This is so much fun. Thank you so much for having me. This was really a blast. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to our interview with Rabbi Shira Stutman. I'm still thinking about how every interview guest has a different idea of what Shabbat practice looks like. And in Rabbi Shira Stutman's house, those parameters included not going out on Friday night. They got takeout, they stayed in, and they considered it an investment. I love that the teenage friends started coming over for Shabbat. That's similar to in our house. I love that our children, because Friday night was special, they ended up bringing friends over, and that made it even more special that we could share it. Other things that I'm thinking about, how we choose to insist on discipline, how we do things over and over, because if you don't make it consistent and if you don't do it all the time, then you'll miss those moments. So it's not very different than what other guests have said to us, that consistency of the ritual is important, even if you don't do it every week, that you still try to make it a practice. Sometimes rituals are also simply affirmations. When Rabbi Shira talks about blessing your kids, it's not necessarily anything new or something they don't know. It's simply an affirmation. And finally, the idea of repair that happens on Shabbat. Eileen calls it a check-in. And we want this podcast to be that, a reminder to slow down, to mend the wounds that need mending, a reminder of how important each other is.
Speaking of reminders, remember to check our guidebooks that go along with each episode on our website. This week, because we're talking about takeout Shabbat and a toddler Havdalah, which, by the way, turns out you don't have to do Saturday night. You get some grace in being able to do later. We're going to give you tips in the guidebook for doing a Havdalah at home and how to make it your own.
If you're enjoying this podcast, please share the word. Send it on to family and friends, and make sure to leave a review whenever you're listening to the show. It also helps other people to hear about the podcast. Until next Shabbat, see you then.
This first season of Regeneration is a 10-episode journey. We invite you to join us every Friday to explore new ideas for Jewish ritual, hear from an inspiring guest, and receive tips to practice on your own. You can visit us at recustom.com/regeneration to download all of your guidebooks, see the episode list, and sign up for our newsletter so you stay up to date on everything happening with Regeneration.
Regeneration is a partnership between Recustom and the Jewish Grandparents Network,
and is hosted by Eileen Levinson and Deborah Weinberg, and produced by Josh Gilbert and Kate Mishkin.
Follow the Regeneration podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back next week. See you then.